Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap. I'm especially excited about this one, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we are going to send out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speaker, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also happening at the end of today's webinar, we'll be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Myth Busting and Application Security. Our speaker today is Jennifer Chaplinsky, who is, I know I just murdered that, Chaplinsky, how's that? Who's the Director of Product Security at Target. I apologize for that, Jennifer, but thank you so much for joining me today, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so I'll say good morning, but I know many of you are dialing in from different time zones, and it may be good afternoon or good evening for you as well. So as Charlene said, I'm Jennifer Chaplinsky. I'm the Director of Product Security at Target. And today we are going to talk a little bit about some myths in application security. So product security is the team that I lead. Product security can also be talked about like the application security team. I've been at Target for 14 years, in security for over 10. And in my function, I lead things like software composition analysis, static scanning, dynamic scanning, our security champions program, and the way that we sort of measure the security of applications. And in the 4 or 5 years that we've been doing some of these things, we've tried some traditional methods and we've tried some non-traditional methods, and we found some really interesting success in busting some of the common ways of doing things in the application security space. So that's why we're going to do some myth busting today. The goal of the product security team at Target is to make it easy for our Target developers to build really secure applications. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about everything and really making sure that that's the mission that we're trying to deliver on every day. So before I talk too much about our application security program, let me zoom out a little bit and make sure that we're all on the same page about the environment in which we work. So as mentioned, I'm the Director of Product Security at Target. And Target, if you work or live in the US, you might know that Target is a Fortune 30 retailer. We have 1,800 stores in all 50 United States and 350,000 team members across the globe. Our stores are here in the US. We have team members really in lots of locations across the world. We have 40 distribution centers, and last year we reported over $75 billion in revenue. And if you shop at a Target store even a tenth as much as I do, you might already know these things about Target. But what you might not know is how critical technology is to the operations that we run. Things like order pickup or drive up, or the partnership that we have with Shipt, who can bring your Target order to people's homes within sometimes an hour or two. All of those technologies are really technology heavy. All of those functions are really technology heavy. And they weren't invented by someone who works in Target's business and then thrown over the wall to our IT partners. Our IT teams are really right there at the decision table with the business partners on a day-to-day basis, and are there kind of creating those innovative guest experiences from the earliest of ideas. In order to make sure that our Target IT team members are being those really innovative and skilled partners, in 2015, we underwent a pretty serious IT transformation for our IT operations. Prior to 2015, we had a lot of projects. We relied heavily on contractors for development, and we used a lot of vendor products. But in order to be as nimble as we need to be to the ever-changing retail landscape, in 2015, we underwent an IT transformation we adopted a product model, and all of the 4,500 or more team members in Target's IT organization are now part of one of the more than 200 products. Those teams largely use agile methodologies, and since I'm here at a DevOps webinar, can definitely say that we really embrace the concepts that many organizations do with DevOps philosophies. We brought a lot of the technical talent in-house and have a lot more team members than contractors. And we really do a lot of in-house development rather than rely on vendor products today. And one thing that we've really adopted over the last few years is to create a culture of folks who are really curious and ever learning. We have a concept internally that's called 50 Days of Learning, and it's quite honestly just a literal title. Every Target team member in an IT space is not only allowed to spend up to and over 50 days a year learning, but really expected to be investing in skill development. And we think that's important to build a really engaged workforce and the elite workforce that we need to have to become a really agile and successful player in the retail space. So I said that our IT organization underwent that transformation in 2015, and the InfoSec team, the product security function that I lead, falls within the info security space. We transformed as well. Prior to the transformation, our role was really more of an enforcer of policy than what we've become, which is really a teacher and a partner for our development teams. And we've adopted some values that we try to live every day to understand our customers and think about the friction and the experience that we're offering to customers when they introduce and use any of the security tools and services that we offer. And focusing on value, we recognize that security is critically important, but also teams are trying to deliver really important features and functions to Target's guests. And so we partner with our development teams to make sure that what we're offering brings value. So from an application security perspective, you can start to see how challenging but really fun and interesting our role as product security is. 4,500 developers, 200 products. We have team members using multiple programming languages. They're checking in code multiple times a week. Many of the products that we offer are externally facing and intended for millions of people to use. And those products need to be easy to use, but also really secure. And so from an application security perspective, it's one of the things that's really fun for me to help our development teams meet their mission on a daily basis. All right, so I promised myth busting, and now that we've got a little bit of context for that, let's start talking about the myths that we've been busting in the application security team over the last few years. And the first myth is that there's no single metric to measure the security of an application. And as someone who's been in this space for 5 or 6 years now, I've heard this a lot. And it's really an interesting question. How do you measure whether or not an application is secure or secure enough? In talking to a lot of people who work in this space, some options that we've seen are security test coverage. So how many security tests you have and how much of the code base do those tests cover? Some organizations use security defects per line of code, which is sort of a relative comparison for how complex an application is for its security. Other organizations use how fast teams are resolving security issues as a measure. And all of those things are valuable, but they end up being a little bit hard to understand from a development perspective. And to get a really good picture, you kind of have to piece all of those things together. So in 2017, we kind of challenged ourselves, gosh, it's really hard for our teams to answer a very simple question, how secure are we? And can we come up with a way that's a little easier for everyone to understand? So we created a concept called product intelligence. Product intelligence is an in-house developed system where we've pulled in data from lots of different places. Right now we're at over 25 different sources where we bring this data together. And this is the product intelligence system. The first thing you would notice when looking at the screen is that it's a single number. So this single number is meant to be an indication for the security health of this particular product. And if you are looking closely at your screen, you can see that the product name is Phacosaurus rex. Unfortunately, that is not a real product at Target. This is all data that we use so that we can sort of illustrate the system. But if Phacosaurus rex were a real application and product at Target, then their product intelligence score would be a 751. The score range is 300 to 850. And if that feels a little familiar, that's on purpose. We've modeled the range of scores to be the same as like a credit bureau would offer for an individual's personal credit score. So we have the same scale as 300 to 850 as a personal credit score, but where we do it very differently from a credit bureau is that we are very transparent about the algorithm that we're using to measure the security of the applications. We show development teams all of the underlying data so that they can verify that the data is correct and really understand, the intent being that they really trust the score that we're giving for the security of their applications. You can see the categories that make up the score at the bottom of the screen. The first and largest category is findings and vulnerabilities. So lots of products have security findings, and certainly a lot of applications get security vulnerabilities over time. And so what we don't measure in this space is how many vulnerabilities you have or how many security findings you have. What we measure for this particular section is for all the security findings and vulnerabilities that you have you met the date by which you committed to addressing the security finding or vulnerability? If you meet the date and address the issue before the close date arrives, then you get full credit. And if you don't close the issue by the time the date arrives, then you don't get credit for that particular finding. And so it's really a measurement of are you doing what you say you're doing rather than the number of findings or the number of vulnerabilities that you have. For us, findings can come in from things like a penetration test. They can come in from audit. We have sort of business partners that work in between the security team and the development teams called Business Information Security Officers, BISOs. The BISOs can create any findings. So from lots of different places, findings can come in, and then vulnerabilities usually apply to the underlying infrastructure that applications run on. So that's the largest category, findings and vulnerabilities. The second category is security services. And what we're measuring here is, are you using the security services and doing the security tests that actually might create findings? We didn't want to over-index on the findings and not measure whether or not people were doing the tests. So these are things like, are you doing penetration testing? Are you using dynamic scanning if that's important to the criteria for your system? Have you entered your information into the security risk register? The next category is security culture, and what we measure here are really two things. Does your team have a security ninja? And is the security ninja doing things that we want the security ninjas to do? If you have some questions about that, that's the second myth that we'll bust. So we'll come back to security ninjas soon. And then the last thing that we measure is security events. Has your team been the cause of any security events in the last 12 months? If yes, then your points can go down by up to 10%. And if no, then you get the full points for that section. So the first thing that teams typically notice on the screen is the score. But what's really important and kind of a secret sauce of the product intelligence system overall is those specific actions to take. So if Phacosaurus rex were a real product, 751 is the score, but what's really important for them is, what do I need to do to get a better score? So for 39 points, they could do some penetration testing on these applications that fall within this product. They have some findings that are overdue that they might want to close. They have some critical vulnerabilities in their underlying infrastructure. They created a security event at some point in the last 12 months. So we outline for teams and wherever possible, hyperlink to the action that we want them to take. So it's really easy to do the right thing from a security perspective. Other things you might notice on the screen, some relative information. 751 is helpful, but without a lot of context, you don't really know if that's good or not good. So we do show that for this particular score, 751, this would put Phacosaurus rex in the bottom 30th percent of all of the products at Target. And that has been a really important element to drive behavior. When we rolled the system out in 2017, I was meeting with a real peer and a real system and said, great, here's your analysis and your team's at a 640 and here's the actions to take, and my peer is saying, yep, that sounds good, got it, sounds good. But when I said that puts your product in the bottom 10% of all products, the conversation changed, and she said, no way that's true. We take security very seriously. There's no way that we're in the bottom 10% of all the products. So it led to a really good conversation about how we really think about and measure security. And so that team's really been able to better understand what we are expecting of them. And in a couple of years since we've rolled out the system, that team that was in the 600 is now at 780 and has a really good security health posture. And then the last element that you might see on the screen is not only do we compare products to each other, but we also let teams compare themselves to themselves. And I'm currently not working in our headquarters office, but before we went on to remote working, and someday when we get back into the office, you could walk around and see in IT team spaces, teams would have their PI score, their product intelligence score on their whiteboards and show where they were and where they're going. We see a lot of teams take a lot of pride, since it's so clearly measurable, in trying to become more secure and get that higher score, which has been a really cool thing to see. So I mentioned that we have some values about trying to be a good engineering partner and really considering the customer experience when we roll things out. And so we do have a lot of additional information so that teams can see all of the underlying data. They can verify that the data is accurate or really dive in to understand. But we want to meet teams where they work. So as you continue to go into the product intelligence system, we offer a lot of integrations. So if a development team sees that they have some findings, they don't have to keep coming back to this system to get that data. They can download that information into their Jira backlog or their GitHub issues and prioritize the security work right alongside all the other features and functions that they're trying to deliver. And as I look at this dashboard, it's for us something that we can see all of the information together. But to just give you a sense for what it was like before we rolled out this system, we used to have teams of security analysts whose job was really understanding all of the security flaws, going into our GRC system where they could get all of the findings data, pulling that data out every month, putting it into spreadsheets, organizing it, sorting it, sending it to development teams, meeting with the development teams to try to understand when they could fit that work in. And when I think about how we worked back then, we said product teams are accountable for the security of their products. We're here to help. But essentially, the security team was doing so much of the work that it almost really felt like we were accountable for the security of systems. So what we've really been able to achieve over the last few years is enabling the development partners to feel and understand and own that accountability for the products that they are building. So we launched this system in 2017, and our initial persona was meant for the development teams themselves. But it wasn't too long after we launched the system that we started to get a lot of requests from the leaders of those teams to say, can I see all of the information for my portfolio grouped together? So we also offer a summary view for leaders of several products. And the leaders can see in those products all of the scores, the percentile of those teams, who they could reach out to if they have questions. But what's been really powerful here is that they can see the trends of information in their particular scope to look at a little bit more about what there are some things they could do thematically to have a culture of security. So they could see that their findings and vulnerabilities probably need to be a bit more of an area of focus, or we would need teams to adopt security services at a faster rate. One of the requests that we had about 18 to 24 months ago is, can we look for specific security flaws in my application and show me some of those trends? So we were able to do that. And then we created training and awareness specific for those particular flaws. And you can see we started to see a lot of really cool improvements in themes of types of security flaws when we were able to pull all of that information together. The other note here is we try to meet people where they work, certainly developers, and that's why we have the integrations with things like GitHub and Jira, but we know that many leaders work in email. So we created a functionality where anyone can subscribe to the information, and rather than continuing to go into the system, they can receive emails either on a regular cadence or upon certain triggers so that they can keep on top of the security posture of the applications in their space. So if any of this sounds interesting and exciting, when we built this system, we did start with 2 or 3 engineers. We have more than that today because the system has grown pretty substantially. But when we started, it was 2 or 3 people kind of pulling the data from different sources. And much of what product intelligence is the algorithm and the actions to take. But where possible, we've used open source components. So the UI that I've been showing is a product that's available via open source called Superset. And that was and continues to be the way that we display the data to teams. The way that we get most of the data is through APIs and integrations with those source systems, and so we are able to use the technology from other applications as well. Some prerequisites, things that helped us really move as fast as we did on this, is asset management certainly helps. If you don't know what you're trying to secure, it's hard to measure how secure it is. Clear policy has been important. Nothing in the product intelligence system is actually new. It's all just the security policy, but in a way that teams can understand how closely they meet the security policy. And lastly, teams care about this because across the organization, their leaders care about it as well. And so this top-down commitment has been a really important element for our success. All right. First, myth busted. You can create a single metric for teams to look at to understand the security posture of their applications. So if we can pivot a little bit, let's talk a little bit about another myth, which is that having engineers join a security guild is important. We should let everybody join the guild and maybe even mandate their participation so we can make sure that everybody has the right security knowledge. Well, certainly security guilds are important. As I mentioned, Target has 4,500 developers, more than 200 product teams. As a security team, we can't be everywhere at once. And I know many organizations do have guilds similar to this. They might be called security champions or advocates or any number of things. Our program is called Security Ninjas. We landed on the name Ninjas because we view that ninjas are people who are nimble and at the top of their game. And I know that other organizations have security ninja programs as well. Where our program is different is that it's not a tiered system for learning, where as people join the program and as they learn more, they move up in the belt system. Our hypothesis when we created this program in 2016 is that if we created a program that was exclusive and somewhat prestigious, that we would get people who were really engaged and really wanted to be there, and we could get people who would be more likely to be permeating the culture rather than allowing everybody in with some levels of engagement. We would get people who were influential and excited to be there and have the most levels of engagement. And so the program itself is exclusive, and that also lets us be a little bit more nimble and transparent about the content that we can share with the people who participate. So what is the Target's Security Ninja program? As I mentioned, we are looking for people who are influential and passionate to join the program. Influential doesn't necessarily mean years of service or how seasoned they are, but essentially what we're looking for are people that when they talk, the team listens. Many times the security ninjas are that trusted advisor for the executives that lead particular areas, and so being influential and really having a voice is extremely important. But we also want people to be passionate about security and security culture. We've had a number of people join the program who are certainly influential, but they're sort of voluntold into the program. I personally have been voluntold into a number of things over the years, and sometimes you're really engaged, sometimes you're not. And that's been the case when we have people who are sort of placed into the program at their leader's request. They show up to the meetings, but they aren't that change agent that we're really looking for. So our criteria are influential and passionate. The program itself, I mentioned it's exclusive, and we've limited it to no more than 5% of our overall tech population. With 4,500 people, that means about 225 total number of ninjas at any given time. Currently, we have 160, so we have a little bit of room for growth, and we'll scale up if we need to. The primary goal of the program is to build security awareness and excitement with those folks who are influential and passionate, and hoping that they really take that back to their teams and create that culture of security with the teams that they work in day to day. And what has happened over the 4.5 years that we've had the program is not something we set out to do initially, but it's been an accidental talent pipeline. Every year since we've had the program, between 4 and 8 people who join the Security Ninja program get so excited about the security field that they end up joining the security team directly. We had someone over the summer leave the Security Ninja program and come to the security team, and that person, when they left, said, without the support and training of the Security Ninja program, my move to security wouldn't have been possible. So when you consider that the security talent is really hard to come by, the fact that we're creating a talent pipeline is a really cool accidental byproduct. So what does it mean if you join the Security Ninja program at Target? First, it means that you're going to spend about 20% of your time doing Security Ninja things. Those things are primarily building and maintaining security knowledge, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means on the next slide. Primarily, it means guiding teams in security best practice. This could be helping a team understand pen test findings. It could be helping a team do a threat model, really being out there and however your team needs you to build a really secure application. The security ninjas do help maintain application inventory data, and they're also a very important partner for the security team. Because they are usually developers working in development roles, but know the security tools better than most, they tell us really clearly what's working and what's not working and help our security team improve the services that we offer. These are the basic expectations that we have for security ninjas, but because we've chosen people who are influential and passionate, we see them going above and beyond all the time. Ryan is a ninja in our point of sale system, so if you check out Target, that's called the point of sale. We have a static scanning tool, and the static scanner didn't include languages that they use on their team, so he built an augmentation to the static scanner so it could scan their applications for flaws. Mohit in our Bangalore office liked the product intelligence system, but it didn't have some measurements that he wanted. So he built an extension of the product intelligence system to measure for additional security issues within his team. It's almost, it blows me away all the time, and I shouldn't be surprised anymore at how awesome and engaged our Security Ninja partners are. So the security knowledge development is really important. If these security ninjas are making security decisions on behalf of the security team, which they are, we want to make sure that they're doing that with some basic security information. So when you join the program, you attend a security fundamentals class, and then also a hands-on hacking, where you don't just learn about specific security flaws, but you can use an intentionally vulnerable web app to test it out and see what kind of things you can find. And that's always been a really powerful tool. Next, we have monthly information sharing meetings where we go into specific topics, or if there are some actions that we identify that we ask ninjas to take, we'll be really clear about that. We have Slack internally at Target, and we have a private channel for the security ninjas, and that channel is really active with security ninjas from different areas of the business partnering to help solve problems. We try to bring the team together either virtually or in person for quarterly hands-on events where we do something a little bit more interactive. And lastly, for those ninjas who really continue just to go above and beyond in their day-to-day work, we have, you join the program as a white belt, but you can earn the ability to be a purple belt or a black belt when you're really showcasing a lot of knowledge and change in the organization around you. We know from talking to our security ninjas that they really like the program, but the point of the program is to have a lot of impact on the development teams in which they work. And so some of the ways that we measure that: first, we do a Net Promoter Score, or an NPS, with the security ninjas every year. And if you haven't been part of one of these, it's a scale of -100 to +100, and it takes out the people in the middle who are a bit neutral. And so the most recent Net Promoter Score that we did with the ninjas, the participants gave collectively a +49 score for the Security Ninja program. And for some context, that's about the same NPS score as Apple, which means that people like being a security ninja as much as they like their iPhone. But what's also really important is not that the participants like it, but they're making that demonstrable and meaningful change in the security culture within their teams. So at the same time that we did the survey with the security ninjas, we asked their teams, how effective is your security ninja? And 79% of the survey respondents said that their security ninja was either effective or very effective at creating a culture of security within their team, which is awesome. Okay, last myth to bust is scan all the things. There are a lot of really scary security things that can happen in applications. And it makes sense on the surface that if I were a development team, I would want to know about all the things. That was our hypothesis. So we created a system and we called it Scan All the Things. And in 2017, we couldn't be more excited about it. We did the thing that all development teams do, which was to have t-shirts printed and we built a system that could scale to scan everything and created a mechanism to give teams all this feedback. And every time we found something, we set an alert, and it was really detailed, and we thought they're going to love it. But they actually hated it. It was just too much information for development teams to process. So we really had to go back and say, gosh, is scan all the things the right thing? So I'll take you on the journey of what we built and then what we learned from that to bust this particular myth. So the objective that we set out in 2017 was to improve application security by integrating SAST into engineering practices. SAST is static application security testing or static scanning, and it's essentially looking at the source code for common security flaws. And the way that we wanted to do that was through three values. One, meeting developers where they work. We don't want development teams to stop developing, to upload their code, or to get their results in a different place. We want to meet people and developers where they work. We want to offer end-to-end solutions. It's not helpful to find problems if we don't really help teams solve problems. And lastly, we want the right way, the secure way of doing something, to be the easiest way to do something. And as we looked back, these are the same objectives and values that we have today. It was really in the implementation that we were able to realize that the approach we were using maybe needed to be adjusted. So what is Spotlightsast? In short, it's essentially a system that integrates between the code management system that we have and the static scanning engines that we have, so that people developing code in the code management systems don't need to go into the static scanning system to do anything. It integrates with, we store our code in GitHub, and so it integrates with GitHub, and teams can really customize where they get their feedback. You can choose Jira, GitHub issues, or email, and customize a few other things about it. But when we first launched the system, we certainly had the integration, but some really key things needed to change after we rolled it out. And the first thing was, every time we found an issue, we sent an alert to the team. That was for every instance of every issue. And so for teams who have really big code bases and are checking in code a lot, they were getting bombarded with information from the security team, and it was hard to sift through what was important and what was just noise. The second thing that we learned through the system implementation is that we wouldn't notify a team if they didn't have any security flaws. But we also didn't notify a team if the scan failed or something happened in the process. So they were often left hearing nothing and not really sure even if the scan was working properly. And the third thing that we wanted to work on is making sure that we're giving them meaningful ways to fix the problem. We gave pretty short snippets in that first iteration for how to fix issues, and teams were often left not sure what to do in order to fix the issue. So in the last 18 months, we've really looked carefully at the objectives, which we're keeping the same, but also the realization of the vision. And so in the newest iteration of the system, we summarize the issues and give teams a single alert rather than dozens or more alerts every time code is checked in. We also allow them to customize the alerts that they get, so they can be notified when scans complete, they can be notified in lots of different things. And so putting that engineer experience first lets them decide how they want to be notified. And lastly, we were bringing in a lot more information about fixes and how to address issues that might be found, including links to training, so that if you have a cross-site scripting in your code, you can follow a link and look at the training that will show you a video of the best way to address that particular flaw. So, as you might be seeing from some of the last couple of minutes of slides, it's been a really exciting 5 or so years in the application security space, and we've certainly had a lot of success and learned a lot as we've gone along the way. And as I think back to the things that we've learned, quite honestly, across the 3 things that I've talked about today, they're not really different learnings. Iteration is the first thing, and that's really important. When I was just talking about our Spotlightsast implementation, iteration was really important. What we thought was going to be really valuable actually needed to be adjusted as we got feedback. And so building an MVP and growing from there is going to be a really important way to build anything like what I've talked about today. Secondly, is focusing on the behavior, or what behavior do we want to drive? Whenever we're making decisions, we're always asking ourselves, what behavior do we want to drive from this decision? And the really good example of that is with our security ninjas. it would be easy for us to tell them security stuff all the time. But if we haven't decided what behavior we want them to drive by telling them something, we're not really going to see the changes that we want to see within our development teams. So really focusing on the behavior that you want to see rather than the thing you want to tell is a really important thing that our team continues to try to do. And lastly, simplicity is incredibly important. Security is complicated. And we have, as I've mentioned, 4,500 or more developers. When we're trying to get 4,500 people to do something, we have to make sure it's really simple. And so with the product intelligence system, a constant push and pull that we have is how do we make sure that it's meaningful and has enough information, but really focusing on that simplicity. And so for me, always challenging ourselves to say that less is more is an important goal. Okay, so that's the end of the sort of prepared part of the conversation. If there are questions, we have some time left to answer any of those as I've been talking.
Yeah, we've gotten some questions in so far, but there is plenty of time for question and answer period. So if you, the audience, has any questions for Jennifer, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it, and we'll just kind of keep plowing through the questions until we're done. So let's see, first question, what was the trigger for the 2015 IT transformation?
Well, I think when the transformation was really in the retail landscape, I think there are a lot of things that are accelerating in the retail space. And if you have followed the news, I mean, honestly, with the pandemic, it's been even a faster acceleration, but it's really hard to predict what retail is going to need 18 months from now. And for some of the ways that we were working, we needed really long tails to be able to realize our vision. And so the trigger has really been us being able to be as agile as we need to be, because it's really, really hard to predict what's going to happen in the retail space. So I would say that was the primary reason that we really adopted that transformation.
All right, next question. How did product security obtain buy-in for the 50 days of learning from development managers?
It's such a luxurious thing to say, but like product security didn't drive the buy-in. That is from our CIO down. It's a really exciting time to be working at Target in the IT organization. Our CIO, Mike McNamara, is really, really aware that for us to continue to become the target with the success that we've had over the last few years, we have to be very elite, very nimble, very innovative. And so to do that, you have to know cutting edge kind of things. And so it's across our IT organization, that 50 days of learning, and that comes from the top on down.
All right. So many good questions. Okay, here's the next one. What was your biggest challenge while overcoming security ownership perception?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but I can answer lots of different things. We've certainly had a lot of challenges. I think the impetus for product intelligence is it was hard for development teams to know if they were secure. And we wanted to help them do that. And so when I talked about the different ways that you can measure the security, putting that into their hands and then, really holding them accountable for the security themselves is that shift that we tried to make. Through the clarity and through the simplicity is the way that we've done it. The hardest part in getting there was probably getting the data integrity together in the product intelligence system. So these are all different source systems that are serving different security and asset management functionality, and making sure that the information makes sense when you plug it in together took a lot of work. And every time we bring a new source in, it's quite a bit of work for the team that's providing that data to make sure that the data sort of fits the format that we're looking for and fits into our taxonomy. And in the first few years that we rolled the system, that was probably where we spent the most of our time.
Okay, all right. Okay, next question. And just a quick reminder that there is plenty of time for questions. So if you do have a question for Jennifer, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel. Is there a requirement for each app dev team to have at least one security ninja, or has participation been optional?
That's a good question. It is not required for every app dev team to have a security ninja. However, it's measured in the product intelligence score. So teams are incentivized to have a security ninja because 10% of their score is, do you have a security ninja? And then is the ninja sort of doing the things that we want the security ninjas to do? And so through the PI score is our best way to sort of reinforce a lot of the things that we're asking teams to do within the culture of their team.
Okay. All right. Next question. So the PIE, so PIE solution was a custom built application?
Correct. PI is a custom built application. The bulk of the secret sauce is really around the algorithm, and then pulling the data in from the different sources and manipulating it to talk and make sense when you kind of put all the data together. What is open source is the dashboarding and the way that we display the information to teams. That's called Superset, although we have really augmented and contributed code back to the Superset team on a number of occasions to make sure that that's working as best as it can for our development partners.
All right, excellent. All right, let's see. Next question. For the internal credit score you're using for teams, how do you figure out which services go into the score? And do you plan to add all security services into the score over time?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I think that that's the tough part. In the early days of the system, we thought we were going to add everything. Anything that mattered from a security perspective should be added into the score. But the problem with that is every time you add a new source, it dilutes everything that is already in the score. And so we make really careful decisions about how to add new elements to the score. What we do in order to introduce those new elements is that we only put them into like the score that counts, the actual PI score, once a year. Teams set goals for themselves around the score, and so once a year in October, we launch a new score, and if we're bringing in any new sources that are part of the algorithm, then we do that at that time. Alongside the score, we also offer a beta score, so as we've added elements that aren't quite part of the measured score, teams could see if this were in a part of the score today, if we added this new element XYZ, this is how our score would be affected. But because we've learned that simplicity and focusing on the behavior is such an important way to go forward, we really limit it to the things that we care the most about so that we don't overwhelm teams with just too much information.
All right. Okay, got a DevSecOps question for you now. Is there a centralized platform team that builds and maintains and secures the CI/CD pipelines, or does each product team take ownership of their own pipeline?
Well, it's a little bit of both. So we have a team that manages the technologies for the pipeline, but you don't engage with that team when you're trying to push your application to production. You just utilize those services. There are less than 10 or so ways that teams can kind of move through the CI/CD process, and we have sort of architecture and EA style teams who make some decisions for that. So it is full stack ownership, but within guardrails for sure.
All right, great. Still plenty of time for questions, guys, so go ahead and get your question in if you have one. Here's the next one. How is Ninja attrition managed?
Fair question, and that's where we do spend some time. Attrition can be because somebody left the team and the new team that they're going to already has a security ninja. They might leave Target, or they might just say, I feel like I've gotten what I need to out of this program, and I'm going to sort of step aside and let someone else come up through. And we really, we leave many of those decisions to the security ninjas themselves. But where we see people sort of disengaging and, hey, we've had all of these events and we haven't seen you in a while, we reach out on a periodic basis and ask the question, is this still for you? Notice we haven't seen you in a while. It's okay if it is, if you've gotten what you need, feel free to step aside. The joke that we make is that it's not like a Supreme Court appointment, it's not lifetime. So if you feel like you've gotten what you can and maybe your job is too busy, then step aside and let someone else into the program to gain that knowledge that you've been able to gain.
All right, great. So many great questions. Here's another one for you. What percentage of open source tools used versus commercial off-the-shelf tools for your security program on the whole?
That's a tough one. I mean, from a security perspective, there are some tools that just would be cost prohibitive for us to develop internally. So I think it depends on the tool. Percentage wise, gosh, I mean, I would know in my space, we oftentimes use vendor products for the back-end engine, but then build integrations to the tools that we use. So for the most part, when it comes to things like SAST, DAST, software composition analysis, our developers don't even know what tools we use because they don't know them by those names. They know them through the integration. And so for us, it's like they just blend in well together. It's not we use a vendor for this and then we have developed this component internally. I'm not sure if I've answered your question though, so if you have a follow-up, just let Charlie know and I can retry on that one.
Okay, great. Next question, beyond SAST, is open source scanning or package management part of the scoring and discipline, or is that done separately?
That's a really good question. It's currently not part of the score. Certainly that's a function that we offer, and we're working now to make sure that that does become part of the score in the next couple of months.
Okay. Next question, how large was the development effort for the Pi solution, initial versus maintenance?
Mm-hmm. We really went with the MVP concept with Pi. We have 25 or more sources now, but when we first launched the system in 2017, it was just 4 things. And we introduced the concept and said, we're going to measure these 4 things. If you do nothing else, do these 4 things, and got some traction and then have added as we've gone over the years. So we got the first version from idea to developers in maybe 3 months. And then built on it from there.
All right, great. All right, let's see, next question. Do all of your CI/CD pipelines have security testing built in at each stage of the software development life cycle? You mentioned SAST only. Do you use DAST or IAST tools, and how many CI/CD pipelines do you have?
Well, wherever possible, it is our goal to integrate security into the pipelines or however we're doing work so that it's just really easy. That's not the case for everything that we offer today, and so that's part of what we're working on. But that's the goal, really. I mean, in a perfect world, a developer would just go about his or her job and security would just happen automatically. So that's really where a lot of the team, the product security team, spends their time today is making sure that we have the right back-end engines for these different things, and then integrating those things right into the day-to-day work of our development partners.
Excellent, excellent. All right, we have about 13 minutes left to the top of the hour. Still plenty of time for questions, guys. So if you have one, please don't be shy. Go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. Next question, do the infrastructure automation teams utilize this as well? For example, system security issues you'd find in container layers with something like Sysdig, or is this only currently managing app development?
As a full stack team, we do bring in the vulnerabilities that exist in the underlying infrastructure. So teams feed us that information, and it includes some container information into it, certainly. That gets tied to the taxonomy, and then the application team is responsible for addressing those things.
All right, great. Next question, are the majority of security tools primarily hosted in public cloud, or are they hosted in private cloud in Target's data centers?
Target has a pretty robust private cloud offering, and so that's usually our preference to move into private cloud, although we have instances where it makes sense to host things in public clouds.
Okay, all right, great. Next question, why build a PI, why build a platform from scratch versus using something like Zero North or Kenna? Did you look at tools like this? If so, what gaps did you find that you felt custom was the way to go?
I haven't looked at Zero North as being similar to the space. It may be, but I go to the different industry conferences and walk the floor, and nothing quite is customizable in the way that our solution is. It doesn't necessarily tie to our taxonomy and give a score that we can customize. That may be the case, but when we launched the system in 2017, nothing really came close to being able to give us the really zeroing in on the behaviors and the scores that we wanted to drive. So for us, with 3 months of effort to get the first version out the door, we really thought that focusing on internal development was the better way to go.
All right, great. Here's another question for you. Do you keep track of the time ninjas spend on product security activities?
You know, we don't. We give them guidelines. So 20% of their time, so roughly a day a week, is meant doing security things. But depending on the team that they work in, that could look like different things. So we give them, here are some things that you can do. The one thing we keep track of is when we have the information sharing forums, are you at least showing up to that? That's the one thing that we do track. But otherwise, we trust that they are the expert and know how to best spend their time. Maybe some weeks it's really nothing. Maybe some weeks it's more than 50% of their time. And so we really just lean on the ninjas to make the right decision for them and for Target for how they spend their day-to-day work.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's see, next question here. For the security credit score, what do you do when teams don't care about their score?
Well, the way we approach it is we are giving you the tools to be accountable for the security of your system. And if you just aren't going to do anything about that, that's really a team decision. Their leaders know sometimes teams have low scores for really good business reasons. Maybe an entire product is going to be sunset, and so it no longer, they don't want to do a lot of investment to fix a lot of security things. And so that's a team decision, not a security decision. We do set a minimum guideline that comes from our CIO on down to say, here's what we think a good score is. We change that every year. And so teams can make a decision themselves for, how they want to hold themselves to a security sort of expectation.
All right, great. Okay, guys, last call for questions for Jennifer. If you have one, now's the time to go ahead and get it in, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your question before the end of the webinar. Okay, let's see. For the Security Ninja program, how do you keep the program fresh and the participants engaged?
That's the biggest thing that we continue to focus on is, we have some people in the program that have been there since the beginning. So they're going on year 4+ with some of the content that we're sharing, but we're also having people who are joining new. And so how do you make information that's new and exciting for people who have been doing this for years, and also bring people who haven't been doing this for years up to speed? And I work with someone who leads the program on a day-to-day basis, and she does a really good job. We do customized stuff where people are, new. We can bring them up to speed with things. But, part of the nice part of the security world is that it changes so quickly that what we were talking about in 2016 is probably not even the same stuff that we're talking about today. And so the world itself just lends itself to learning new things. But, that's the time when if people are like, I think I know all of this and it's starting to feel repetitive, then we ask them, hey, is now maybe the time for you to step aside and let someone come in? And so it's really a combination of trying to make sure the content is fresh, making sure that we make it as fun as possible. We think we're fun. I guess with the NPS scores, people seem to like it. So we do try to make it fun. We do the typical things that IT teams do. We offer food and t-shirts whenever we can, not currently because of the pandemic, but when we're in the office. But it's a certain time, maybe people have gotten what they need and then they just choose to let someone else take their spot.
All right, great. I think we have time for just a couple more questions and we'll close it out. You've been answering a whole lot of questions here. Let's see, next one. Does product security do one-on-one coaching with development teams who choose to have ninjas?
We would if they asked. What we do a lot of times is in our Slack channels, when teams are seeing flaws that come from the different testing tools, pen testing, dynamic scanning, static scanning, we don't do one-on-one coaching per se, but we answer a lot of questions. We dedicate somebody every week to be sort of on point for questions, and that person's usually quite busy helping support teams. But we don't necessarily go out and proactively coach teams unless they're asking us for specific questions.
All right, Excellent. Next question, do the security ninjas help developers with predictive intelligence of security threats? For example, leveraging machine learning models as part of the backend systems, munging the log and analytics data of the product?
I'm sure somewhere one of them is. Like I mentioned earlier, they surprise me all the time with how innovative they are. Maybe especially when we get into the Target has a data science team, and I would see them in some of the data science teams doing that, but nothing that we do sort of collectively or organized.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Next one. Does your director role umbrella also manage other core value or processes beyond the security scope, or is that its full scope?
My full scope as the director of product security is pen testing, static dynamic, software composition analysis, the product intelligence system, and the security ninja program. There are, a number of other roles in security, certainly. But we, as a product security team, partner really closely with the teams that do sort of enterprise architecture, who offer those CI/CD tools to make sure that we integrate in. But those aren't necessarily part of my scope. Those are just really close partnerships.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, next question. I think this will make this the last question, so we can get things wrapped up on time. What were the major cultural challenges faced when implementing the product security and security ninja program at Target?
Cultural challenges. That's a really great question. I have to go back and think. I think when I think about security ninjas, there was some discussion and maybe some scoffing at the time commitment. So going in and asking for 20% of, at that time it was 60 people, we need 20% of 60 people's time is a pretty big ask. And so we didn't necessarily roll out the program without being really thoughtful about how we wanted it to be perceived. So we did a lot of selling the problem and the concept of security can't be everywhere at once, and how we're here to set teams up for success and help them be accountable for the security. And so we were really, really thoughtful about making sure that we outlined the problem and how this particular solution helped solve that problem. And that's been true for really everything that we talked about today. The product intelligence system, the sell was a little bit easier because the development teams were coming to us and saying, it's just too much to manage, how do I simplify? But really, I think whenever we're trying to roll something out from a security perspective that has an impact on time or a process, is to be really careful about what problem does this solve, and then how does this particular solution solve that problem.
All right. All right, great. Well, we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so unfortunately that is all the time that we have for the question and answer period. But I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions, and if we didn't get to your question, please know that Jennifer will be getting a copy of all the questions that came in. So I'm sure she or somebody from her organization will be more than happy to follow up with you offline. Awesome, awesome. All right, great. Well, I also want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any of the webinar, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we are sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinar, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Also, at the top of the hour, I did mention that we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. Our first winner today is Daniel O. Congratulations, Daniel. Our second winner today is Janice G. Congratulations, Janice. Third winner today is Paul F. Congratulations, Paul. And final winner is Melinda R. Congratulations, Melinda. We'll be following up with all 4 of you offline by email to get your information on your gift card over to you. Please check your inbox. If it's not there, please check your spam folder. Jennifer, what a great presentation. I just really enjoyed the heck out of that one. So thank you so much for great information, for your expertise and your knowledge and experience. Lots of good stuff all the way around. And judging from the number of questions we got, holy smokes, I think you may have hit the jackpot on the questions there. So yeah, really good stuff. So thank you so much for taking the time and doing
Absolutely.
the webinar with us
Thanks,
today.
everyone, for joining.
Awesome. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
Thank you.